Hi, everyone. It's me, Tim. Today, I want to talk about corporate brands in the outer worlds, which I think ties really nicely into yesterday's video about coming up with names for Fallout. So, in the outer worlds, which is set on a very distant colony, ruled by a very dystopian group of corporations. Now, we knew at the very early outset, Leonard and I were working on the setting. We knew we were going to have a lot of corporations because we knew we wanted that Firefly-esque feeling to the setting. And this required us to create a large number of companies and their slogans and their products and logos and slogans. When we did this, we had a plan in mind for how we wanted to do it. And we also had a lot of influences that we knew we wanted to cover. There is one big origin for brands for me, but there's a lot of influences on it too. So I kind of want to talk about that. The other things that kind of factor in here is I want to talk about how hard it is to do humor, how hobbies outside the game industry, which I've already talked about with the Disneyland video, how hobbies you have will affect your game development. I also want to talk about getting the team all focused and going in one direction because there's no way. I mean, we weren't going to do all of this. We were going to have other people on the team make companies and products. All the logos and everything had to be done. I wasn't going to do that. I mean, look at this. This is awesome. So let's talk about what I think is the big influence. And a sharp-eyed viewer already saw them back here, these boxes. So I brought one down. These were boxes of Wacky Pack cards that someone gave me recently. But just so you know, I have been collecting these cards since the 70s. Got my collection. That's really bright. I have my collection still. Many. It's huge. I have a very big collection. And they're all originals. I mean, some of these are 50 years old. I'm gonna put this down. And they're things that I basically have been collecting since I was a kid. I did it with my brother. We traded cards with other kids on the block. I mean, really detailed trades, 3-for-1, 3 commons for a rare. The kind of things kids do now with, I don't know what, Magic the Gathering. Is that still a thing? But what I loved about it was I actually loved the cards themselves. Each card was a product, a joke product based on a real product. And I actually have a book that I bought at one point which shows how to do collections and what all the different cards are and what their values were. But I wanted to show you what my favorite one was, even when I was a kid. My favorite card, which I had, it's in here. It's Crust toothpaste, which of course is based on Crest. And it said it was garlic flavor. And then I love there was a little slogan at the top. It said, "Remember to brush your teeth twice a month." And that just as a kid, that just got me. So I loved that. I love that humor just kind of infused some of my ideas for Outer Worlds. But of course, I've often talked, Simpsons and Futurama really infuses that as well. So if you look at some of my favorites, which was Spacer's Choice, that was based on a Simpsons episode where Bart got a credit card and Lisa was figuring out that he was doing it. So he bought her Trucker's Choice pep pills. And I always like that word, Trucker's Choice. So when we did Spacer's Choice, I don't know why I just went, it's not the best choice, it's Spacer's Choice. Knowing it was going to be a cheap brand. And they're kind of just telling you it right there. There was another slogan that Leonard came up with called Taste the Freedom. And that was because Spacer's Choice is a division of United Defense Logistics. Because of course it is. The other one that I liked was Auntie Cleo's and their slogan, "Better Than Nature." So you know they made a lot of drugs. That one came from two sources. One was Futurama, Mom's friendly robot company. I loved Mom. I loved how she presented herself as this nice, sweet old lady, but really she was this ruthless corporate executive. And there used to be a TV show on the weekends, which was a television psychic named Miss Cleo. And I hadn't thought about that in years, but then somebody did a song called Miss Cleo. I don't think you really know. Basically saying, was she really making predictions? Were those predictions right? And I just merged them together into Auntie Cleo, which was this friendly, older woman. And Auntie Cleo made your prescription drugs and foods that probably were dosed. And the rule was, anything she made was better than nature. These were hard to get right. I mean, we wanted these things to be, as Leonard talks about, not too silly and kind of dark. One of those things came not from a named brand, but we needed meat to be in a lot of these things. So we wanted things, Borst was the meat, Borst product, Borst pockets, and Borst loaf, all these Borst-based things. And I had this idea for the Cysty pig, which was a pig that had been genetically modified to have cancerous tumors that would erupt all over its body. But two things about them: they were pure meat, they were pure flesh, and they would drop off naturally. So it didn't kill the pig. So you could harvest meat off an animal like you would harvest fruit off a tree. Now, the company did this because it was way cheaper to raise an animal to an adult and then harvest all this meat off it, rather than to raise it to be an adult and then you can slaughter it and get one thing of meat, one product of meat. So they did it for the cost savings, but they presented it as kind of a very high-minded, animal friendly look. You can have meat without killing the animal. And so that's perfectly, what Auntie Cleo, or I believe actually no, they were made by C&P, which was because when I grew up on the East Coast, there was a lot of grocery stores called A&P for Atlantic and Pacific. C&P, I think, stood for Central and Pacific. They didn't have any Atlantic stores in this universe. So they had genetically modified pigs to be cysty pigs. From then, we generated a lot of fake food stuff, modified rice. We had modified chocolate. We had modified cows, the woolly cows. We had modified snakes, so you could get leather off of a snake because they shed their skin. We had all these things that would then went into products that then had to be divided. We had all these charts of we need armor and weapons and food. They went into all these weapons or all these categories, and then those we had to come up with product names and slogans and then assign them to companies, because we had companies that made primarily drugs, and we had companies that made primarily weapons or armor, and then we had companies like Spacer's Choice that made a little bit of everything, but everything they made was kind of bad. Now, there's no way we could do this ourselves. So one thing that was great about this is we made a lot, and then we encouraged people on the team to make more. So that was one way not only to get people all focused in one direction, but they got to own some of it too, because people went nuts. And some of the logos that were created were awesome. It also meant that, once somebody makes something for a game, then that means they own it. And that was really important, because I realized, and I mentioned this in another video, I got really lucky in Fallout because we were all kind of making the same game. And I thought, wow, I must be a really good leader. No, that didn't happen as much. It still happened a lot, but it didn't happen as much on Arcanum or Vampire. And when I was at Carbine on WildStar, that didn't happen at all. I was there 3 years as a programming director and then 3 years as a design director. And the entire 6 years I was there, I don't think everyone on that team was making the same game. Everybody had kind of their own game they were making and throwing stuff in. And it was really hard to get it to gel. And that's where I told you I learned more from, and I say failure, I don't mean the products were failure, the games were failure, but my role there, I don't view that as very successful. And I learned more from that than I would from Fallout, because when Fallout shipped, so many things came together by complete happenstance that I didn't learn from it. So by the time I got to Outer Worlds, I was like, okay, Leonard and I designed enough things that we had a framework. We had, this is the space of where our humor is, and these are the space of our products, and these are what kind of weapons and armor we want, and this is how we want combat to feel. But we let people on the team run with it and own things. And I think that works out a lot better that way. And I think it kind of shows in the vast array of companies and products in the Outer Worlds. And what I love about it is all really goes back to 1970s wacky package collecting Tim. So again, you never know what you do in life that's going to come back and inform your games. So I thought people would like to hear about that. Hope you liked it.